Are you guys ready to get your hands dirty today? Well, there's no better way to spend a day than out in the garden, and today we're going to be spending a ton of time in the garden because I have lots of tasks to do. I'm going to be taking you through a full day of me working in the garden, everything from moving dirt to planting seeds to my new favorite love, which is herbal tinctures. So come along, hang out with me for the day. The first thing we're going to start with is actually moving some dirt. My husband has been tearing apart parts of our garden or parts of our yard. Number one, reduce the amount of grass we have, because the more grass you have, the more you have to cut. But also we want to be planting more of our native plants to encourage pollinators and to increase some predatory animals, and just because it's pretty and it really helps the wildlife. So one thing that we did is we've cut out a couple areas by our pool deck and around our pool pump to be able to place those plants there, and by doing that we had to tear out that part of the grass, and we also had to dig out some of the native soil, which is quite sandy. I saved some of this soil because I really wanted to use it in my beds. And you might be wondering, why would I want to add sandy soil to my beds? That's because mine are so enriched now that they are holding on to water probably a little bit too much. So adding sand to them will not only top them off, but it's also going to help with the drainage a little bit. So once I have all of that dirt loaded into my very trusty gorilla cart here, we're probably going to just go ahead and start with this bed here. This is actually the bed where the sweet potatoes are going. They're about half full with sweet potatoes there. The other half of this bed has tomatillos and tomatoes. And the reason why I picked this bed is because sweet potatoes, tomatillos, and tomatoes all have no problem whatsoever with having their stems buried deeper. So I know that I can put down a lot of dirt here and it's not going to hurt these plants. Now if I were to do this with a different plant, say cucumbers or squash, or maybe not peppers. Peppers are kind of iffy in this particular area, but some other plant, you could actually cause root rot by burying them deeper or adding more soil. But with these guys, they're going to be just fine, which is why I picked this bed. Once that task was completed, I decided to take myself kind of a little break in the shade. It's very hot today, and have a little sip of my juice there and try to get my electrolytes and my sugars back up. And I'm going through my seeds at this point because I really need to start figuring out which summer seeds I'm going to plant, and I'm actually going to be planting some of those today. It may seem a little early for summer seeds, because technically, summer doesn't actually happen until like late June. But here in Florida, it pretty much already feels like summer. So we are going to go ahead and start planting some of these. And you also have to consider that a lot of these plants that I have in my garden right now, which are more warm season plants, they're almost on their way out, or they're going to be heading on their way out, because as it continues to heat up, they are not going to like that and they're going to die out. So I like to have plants ready to go in their place. I'm not a big fan of having my beds empty. I like them to be fully planted pretty much all year round. The plants I am going to be starting today, I have a couple different groupings. The first grouping over there on the right are a lot of my different flowers. I'm going to be putting those into bed 9. The next set are a bunch of different flowers, milkweeds, those kinds of things, native Florida plants that I'm going to be starting in trays. Haven't had the best luck with getting these guys going, so we're going to see how they do. The next set is a lot of my beans, my Jackson Wonder, my Whippoorwill, my Thai Soldiers, and those are going to end up going throughout different places of the garden. I'm actually going to hold off on the Whippoorwills for right now because I need a better place for them. We're going to start with the Thai Soldier beans. These corn have started to create their silks, which means I probably only have less than a month left before these guys will be out. And so I'm kind of creating a little spot here where I didn't have very good corn germination, and I'm going to put my Thai Soldier beans here. These will be my green bean alternatives through the summer. And they're really easy to plant, and I plant them very close together, as you can see, because they are kind of a trellising plant. They're semi-vining. They're not going to get super crazy out of control like maybe the Puerto Rican black beans, but they are going to grow nice and tall. In this bed, which is where I just put all that dirt, I'm going to test something out. I'm putting down some good soil on the top here because I know that it will hold, the water a little bit better than the sandy soil will. I'm actually going to take one side of this and I'm going to plant in the sandy soil, and the other side I'm going to plant in the nice good dirt and see if they will actually germinate in both types of soil. I'm very curious as to whether the sandy soil holds enough water to be able to germinate. And I'm putting a bunch of zinnias. These are the giant zinnias. I've had so many compliments on my Instagram page of these very, very big and beautiful zinnias. I love them, and I want to be able to save as many seeds as possible. So I am planting an entire pack right here. And part of that is because I accidentally got them wet. And once they get wet, you pretty much have no choice. You have to plant them. I'm going to cover them with some leaves here as a mulch. Over here in my 8th bed is where I'm going to put my Jackson Wonder lima beans. They do very good during the summer. I space them about 2 to 3 inches apart. They are a bush type plant and they get very, very bushy, and they don't seem to mind the heat. So we're going to place those here, and I didn't need to put any soil down here. I hadn't put any sandy soil in this particular bed, so this has my good raised bed mixed soil in here, and we're just going to water those in nice and deeply. I am expecting some rain over the next couple days, so hopefully I shouldn't have to water them very often over the next couple days. And then we're just going to cover them up with the mulch that was already there and see how they do. Last summer I had pretty amazing results with sunflowers, and I really wish I would have grown more. These particular sunflowers that I'm growing aren't really the kind of sunflower seeds that you eat, so I'm not necessarily growing these for, an edible flower here, but more for the bees, and also just sunflowers make me happy. There's something so funny about sunflowers. They are such a little happy plant, and I absolutely love growing them. I think I'm growing 4 different kinds. There's a Velvet Queen. There's a multi-head one that I grew that's a little bit shorter. I think it's called Short Stuff. And a couple other various ones that I had just a handful of seeds left. So we're going to plant them right here next to the roselles. We got a couple rains over the last few days, and that really helped with the germination of these seeds. I'm going to show them to you to see how quickly they did come up. So we already have our Thai soldier beans came up. We already had our zinnias come up. And let's check out and see if we got any of the Jackson Wonders or the sunflowers. See, we got several of those little seedlings popping up. And the cool thing is whether we used the good soil or we used the sandy soil, they all popped up really well. Believe it or not, we actually do have our very first sunflowers coming in. There's a couple over here as well. The way that you can see one right here and one right there. And then over here, you can barely see the start of those sunflowers coming out as well. So I suspect we're going to have a really nice little sunflower patch right here. Now I do have a couple greens, greens and herbs that I want to start. And so I'm going to put those in my green stalks just so I can keep a closer eye on them. I feel like I just do better with the fussier plants in my green stalks because I do go out and check them every day. So in these pockets I'm going to be doing basil, Ethiopian kale, and a Malabar spinach, which I attempted to grow last year, didn't germinate for me, so we're going to try again this year. While I'm over here in the green stalk area, I'm going to cut down this very dead Tokyo Becana. I've been wanting to save the seeds because I'm almost out of my Tokyo Becana. And so all that I'm doing here is I let this plant completely die and dry. And so what we have left after the flowers produced was these like pods. They start out with green pods. They look like tiny little green beans. And if you allow them to continue to sit there and dry completely out, they're going to get brown and crispy. All I do is I just kind of break them open with my hands over a mason jar. You could do a cup, a glass, a plate, whatever you have. And I just kind of rub them with my fingers to break them off the plants and into the cup. And as I'm doing that, the seeds are coming away from the actual pods quite easy because they are, you know, so crispy and brown that they just kind of break apart in your hands. This probably means that in this little spot, I probably missed a few going into the cup, and it is not uncommon for me to be growing some random seeds in my yard from collecting seeds. After I've collected them and kind of crushed them up a little bit here, I put them on a paper plate or any kind of plate, and I start blowing off the chaff, which is the seed pods that remain, and all that you have left are the seeds, which go into a little paper envelope for me to hold on to for next season. I also did this with my trigemicide. I love that during the winter, and I was able to save enough seeds to be able to grow it next season. Our next task in the garden is we're going to harvest some herbs. This is my German chamomile. It's kind of a smaller size plant than maybe the other more traditional kind that gets quite big. It is an annual. This version is an annual, so I don't expect this to come back. So I'm saving this plant for two reasons. One, so that I can grow it, you know, next year, but also so that I can make a chamomile tea, which is great for relaxation and sleeping. We basically use it as a substitute for sleepy time tea. And I'll let those flowers dry inside my house for a couple days. This plant, every 4 or 5 days I have to come out and pick the flowers off of it, so I suspect I'm going to have quite a bit of chamomile tea this summer. The other herb that I'm going to be harvesting today is lemon balm, because I'm going to be making a lemon balm tincture, and I'm going to show you how I do that. But the first thing we've got to do is we've got to clip some of the leaves off, and you can see I've clipped quite a bit. I'm going to show you the size container that those are going to go into, which is quite small. Before we process the lemon balm, we're going to go ahead and process two tinctures that I have been working on for about 6 weeks now. One is a borage tincture and the other is an oregano oil. So these guys, I just chopped up the herb and I put them in glycerin. You can also use a very high alcohol content, alcohol like Everclear or vodka. I don't have the healthiest relationship with alcohol, so it's not something that we keep in our house because of that. Back in my working days, alcohol was a way that I used to relieve stress after a long work day or work week. And so it was kind of a crutch for me for a long time. And so since I retired from the corporate world, I try to keep alcohol out of our house at all times, just so that it's not a temptation for me. And so glycerin is a great alternative to alcohol when you're making tinctures. And glycerin comes from vegetable oil. It's kind of a byproduct of the processing of vegetable oil. You want to make sure that you buy the food grade one. If you're like me and you don't really keep alcohol in the house, glycerin is a great alternative to alcohol for your tinctures. Perhaps it's a religious reason why you don't consume alcohol, or maybe it's because you plan on giving these tinctures to your children and you don't want them to consume alcohol. Glycerin is the way to go. It does last quite a long time. Maybe not as long as alcohol. Alcohol does last for several years, where glycerin probably is only a preservative for about a year, maybe two, if you're keeping it, processed and stored very well. But it is a great alternative for those of us who don't want to use alcohol. I just recently got into herbal medicine. I am in love with it. I am not an expert by any means. I am just a beginner, and you're probably going to notice that because I am doing the very basics of tinctures. For a long time, we have done teas, we've done herbs as seasonings, and all of those are great ways to get those herbs into your daily diet. But tinctures are an interesting way of getting a very concentrated amount of the herb into your diet and into your day-to-day that will really impact the good qualities of that herb into your body. I do have a lot more plans about doing more herbal medicines, particularly I think they're called oxymels, where you use things like fermented honey and fermented garlic and all kinds of different things that you mix together for colds and cough type things, like a fire cider. I'm really into a lot of that, but I do have to grow a lot more plants that I traditionally have not grown in the past. But I am trying to get a lot of those plants going so that I can use them to create my tinctures. Now, of course, you can always buy your herbs if you would rather do it that way and create your tinctures from that. There's a lot of really great companies out there that sell very clean, organic herbs that you can use in your herbal medicines. And so all that you do is you put your herbs, whether they're dried or fresh, into that mason jar, and you fill it, top it completely off with the glycerin. And then it's just as simple as leaving it on a shelf in a dark spot, dark, cool place for about 4 to 8 weeks. I went 6 weeks with these. And then all you have to do is after the 6 weeks has passed, on occasion through that time period, shake it up, just to kind of agitate the mixture. I probably did that maybe 4 times. And then you just strain off the herbs and separate the oil from the herbs, and then you put those oils in a container. I like these little dark amber dropper containers because, it is going to last a lot longer if it is in a dark space, and the amber bottles help with that. The oregano oil tincture is actually really good for colds and coughs. I hadn't even known that oregano oil was a thing until my brother-in-law went to the health food store and he had a cold, and they encouraged him to take oregano oil, and he said it really helped with the cough. So I thought, I've got a ton of oregano. I should make some. So I made some for him and another bottle for myself. The other one that I did is a borage tincture. I grew borage in my green stalk this last fall, and borage is really good for things like anxiety, relaxation. It's not one that you want to take on a regular, from what I understand and what I've read, or if you have certain kinds of medical conditions with your kidneys or your liver. That's one of the reasons why you don't want to take it every single day. But if you have something very stressful coming up, maybe you have an event at work, maybe you're just going through a tough time at home, and you want something that's going to help with your anxiety and relaxation, then a borage tincture is the way to go. To take these, all you have to do is 2 or 3 drops of the tincture, whether it's for cold, for the oregano oil, or whether it's for relaxation. You can put it in a cup of tea as long as it's not boiling. You can put it in a glass of water, you can put it in some iced tea, or you can just ingest it directly from the dropper. Now that we've processed our tinctures and they are in their final state and they're in their dropper bottles, I'm going to go ahead and start making my lemon balm. Lemon balm is good for lots of things. One is digestion. But the one that I'm using it for is relaxation and sleep. So part of my sleepy time tea is going to have chamomile, it's going to have lavender, and it's going to also have some of this lemon balm oil. So I'm chopping up the leaves. You don't have to do this. You could leave them whole, but I'm using such a small jar here because I don't really want to produce as much as I produced of all the other ones. So I'm cutting up my leaves, my fresh leaves, they didn't have to be dried, and I'm putting them into this little tiny mason jar. I'm pressing them down in there to get as many of the leaves as possible, and then I'm going to take my glycerin and I'm going to pour it into the jar, and I'm going to do this in stages so that way it really gets down in there. You can use a knife or something to kind of push it around, get out those air bubbles, and then just keep adding that glycerin until it's completely topped off. Then you just put a top on it, shake it up a little bit, and stick it in your cabinet for 6 weeks. Thanks so much for spending the day with me. I hope you had a good time watching me do all the different things that I did in my garden today. It was a little bit of a mishmash of this and that, along with getting those tinctures done, which I am super excited about. If you want to watch more of my videos between now and my next upload, I'm going to put them up here and here. Happy gardening, guys!